A lot of new bikes have hit the market in 2024. We mean a lot.
Yeah, and just as quickly as a lot of those new bikes have come into the market, we kind of expect that a lot of them are going to fall out just as fast.
And while some of these bikes have some pretty amazing specs, we're here to tell you why you shouldn't sleep on the Surron brand in 2024 and why it still makes a lot of sense to buy and build Surrons in 2024.
Yeah, and there's a lot of key reasons why we at Charge Cycle Works are an authorized Surron dealer. Things like the build quality, the aftermarket support, warranty, the endless things that we can do to each of these bikes. And lastly, the model lineup. There's something from 10-year-olds up. And so we're going to walk through a few of those today. So let me get into quality first because we see this every single day. When we go and we build a bike to put it on the showroom floor, we know that we're getting the same thing every single time. Every one of these little tick marks where it's been QA'd, that they Loctited that bolt, we can kind of know and trust that that's going to exist on all of the bikes. So building a Surron has gotten easier over time, again, because we know what to expect.
Another thing worth mentioning is we have literally modified hundreds, if not thousands, of Surron Light Bees by this point. And what we've noticed from the aftermarket side is when we get aftermarket parts and we build up, let's say a $10,000 Surron Light Bee, the consistency from bike to bike over the months and the years has been incredible to where we can trust that when we upgrade these bikes, it's going to be a consistent process every single time. And the amount of problems we run into are very rare. So the quality control coming out of the factory is superb. And we also modify other bike brands out there quite a lot, and we don't see that same level of quality control. There are much more variances from bike to bike.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes from Surron's age, right? They're basically going on their 10th year, I think it is. The Light Bee that I know of has been, what, 5-6 years now? And so they just have that consistency that they learn and kind of grow from mistakes every single year, and they fix them. We don't exactly see that with a lot of the other brands that we test. Like, a lot of bikes come to us without Loctite on the bolts. So you don't even make it through the first ride before it starts feeling loose and rattling a little bit, or simply bolts fall out in the trailer ride to go to the trail, right? It's ridiculous sometimes. With Surron, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so one other point from a maturity standpoint is Surron has also set up a dealer network nationwide so that you as a customer can go on their website, look at the map, find a dealer near you, and not just have to buy a bike online and kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, and that's a game changer for the industry because, you know, I don't know about you, but I've probably bought, 40 different motorcycles in my lifetime. Never have I bought one off the internet. It's always been from a local dealer who I trust, who when I have a problem, they're there to support me. Yeah. I can go in and buy parts and have them service the bike. And it's a big difference, and it's an evolution of this market. And over time, I expect more will do that. But today, Surron is the only one with a nationwide dealer network.
Yeah, and we're actually held to a standard. So when you go into a Surron authorized dealer, there's a couple things that are expected of us to have OEM parts ready for when something goes wrong. We also go through a PDI, a checklist, that when we're building a bike to put it on the showroom floor, that a customer can really walk out with the bike and start riding it immediately without worrying if it was put together correctly. So when you add all of these things together, you just get great aftermarket support, well, maybe not aftermarket, after sale support from a Surron authorized dealer.
Yeah, exactly. And for a lot of people, that's really important. So let's talk about the warranty and especially the support that we as an authorized dealer have from Surron USA that the other brands don't have.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, what I often will refer to as Surron North America or Fetch Light came in, set up a US warehouse, brought all the bikes in, brought in all of the OEM parts so that we as a dealer can get bikes when we need them faster, and most importantly, get all the small parts that can often fail or get broken when people crash their bikes. And so that's nice to know that we have access to those on demand pretty much.
Yeah, it is. And it's just another evolution of the market. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when KTM first came into America and everybody was like, who's this new brand? Where are they made? And the early adopters, it was very painful because if you had a KTM back in the day, the first question your buddy would ask you is, how long does it take you to get a spare part for that bike? And the answer was not good. And so Surron, I think, has learned from history and is solving this problem early on.
Okay, so if you're not a Surron owner today, here's a couple things that really should matter to you. It comes with a 1-year warranty, and you know that you can come back to your local dealer to get replacement parts, right? That's really important in a world of garage-based sellers out there. We really struggle with the gray market in our industry where people might be a dealer and have all of 8 bikes that they're trying to sell to someone. And what we hear the most often is like, something goes wrong, they can't get back in touch with that person, or that seller just owns up to it. Well, I don't know how they work, I can't get you parts, right? I just kind of Alibabaed some bikes, and if you want to buy one, cool. We've seen a lot of people get burned by that. They come to us hoping that we can kind of help, and if you bought an gray market bike, there is no warranty, unfortunately, so there's not really that much we can do other than sell you some replacement parts or maybe aftermarket parts.
Yeah, I think we get phone calls daily with this scenario where they don't have the support they need, they're looking for help, so they reach out to us, and obviously we can't do a warranty in that situation, but we can use the aftermarket to solve their problem most of the time.
So again, if you're thinking about what bike and brand you want to go with, I want to talk a little bit about the legal side of what's coming in the near future. So a lot of bikes will come with I can't call it a VIN, but like a frame number,
a serial number
stamped on the side. Surron actually comes with a true VIN that is recognized inside the DMV system. They come with a manufacturer certificate of origin that we sign over to each buyer. And it's such a mature package of paperwork that you can take to your local DMV, and you're covered moving forward as legislation starts to happen where you have to register each bike for off-road riding. We've got you covered on the Surron side of the world. We can't really say that for the other brands that only come with a frame stamped serial number.
Yeah, so if you're the type of person that you want to abide by your local laws, and these laws are evolving and changing, the more that these bikes flood the market, the more the laws are catching up with them. So if you're the type of person that wants to be, above the law, or sorry, not above the law, but with the law and not violating it, Surron is by far the easiest bike to, whether it's an off-road sticker or even getting an actual title and making it street legal. We've had a lot of customers do that. We've done it ourselves. It is the easiest bike brand to do that with because Surron has already done the legal paperwork and the VIN number and the MCOs that no other brand is currently doing, no other Chinese brand, I should say, in this market.
So it's worth mentioning that none of the bikes that we actually sell from Surron are street legal. What we mean is that because it's recognized by the DMV system, if you choose to add your own aftermarket turn signal kit, working brake light, maybe DOT tires, you can take it down to your local DMV and they will approve it for like a commuter to ride to work or ride to school. One of the other important parts of being recognized in the DMV system is we can actually finance a Surron. We cannot finance some of the other brands that are out in the market because they're just not as compliant or legal or mature behind the scenes. I think that's a really solid benefit for a Surron.
Absolutely.
So one thing that's kind of cool as an authorized dealer is that Surron has the most diverse lineup, I think, of like bike offerings in the market. So there's 4 different models, and it's kind of cool when a family comes through the door that I can sell the Light Bee S to like a 10 or 12-year-old Light Bee X We all know it, love it, right? A bike that feels like in a way it kind of sells itself, like it has that name brand recognition that suits everything from like our kids and wives to like us modding these things and having a ton of fun. The Ultra Bee is a killer trail bike. We just had really good results at TKO last year. When we're gonna go for like a day out riding with like all of our guys, we're probably all riding Ultra Bees at that point, versus if we're gonna go into a track day and play and have fun, we're back on the Light Bees. And then of course there's the larger Storm Bee, which is probably the closest we can get to a full gas dirt bike replacement. It's just one of the biggest bikes, so if you're a bigger, heavier rider, that's a perfect bike for you. So anyway, we can kind of cover the whole spectrum just with the Surron brand alone.
And yeah, we don't talk about the Storm Bee a whole lot, but it's interesting to know that they went out and competed at the 24-hour Glen Helen. I think they broke some records out there with that bike. And once again, that just goes to show the quality. Like, these are bikes that can survive endurance races and are made really, really well.
I think one thing that we've talked about behind the scenes a few times is that if we had a Storm Bee at the time that we raced the Gypsy 500, that probably would have been a great bike to go out and just put in lap after lap after lap, to know that you've got the power and to know that you've got the range to actually make it through 2 to 3 laps of that race without dying or running out of battery.
I think that's a good point. So Surron, you're probably listening to this video. Next year, Gypsy 500, how about you throw a few Storm Bee batteries our way, and we'll put one of those bikes in the Gypsy 500.
So I'm going to give you a real world example from something that actually just happened today. So a family came in and they were looking at a Light Bee X. Now the smallest son was 10 years old, so it was nice to see how well he fit on the S model, because everything's 30% less. A little bit smaller package, 30% less power. So it seemed to fit him absolutely perfect. The mom instantly went for a Light Bee X because she could put her feet down. It's so easy to ride around and really get comfortable on it. And then the dad wanted to get immediately onto an Ultra Bee because coming from the dirt bike world, it felt like his size, right? Moto brakes, moto suspension. So it's really cool that we can get a family on a small fleet of bikes, it seems like, where they can go out and ride together, because one thing that dad recognized very quickly, that if he stays on his gas dirt bike, it's always that constant thing of finding neutral, turning it off so that you can talk, getting it started back up again. What happens if you have to lay it down to go and help your son, and then you got to come and pick up the big heavy bike again? So transitioning from the gas world into the electric world, and something for everyone in the family.
Yeah, and as a dad who has raised 5 kids on dirt bikes, I can tell you that if an Ultra Bee had been around back when my kids were young and I was raising them and I was teaching them how to ride bikes, I absolutely would have had an Ultra Bee, because you're right. Like the clutch, the neutral, I gotta stop, I gotta pick my kid up who just took a digger in the dirt. Like, it's so much easier on an electric dirt bike where you can just like plop it down and go to them and then get back up and go. The ease of that is so great for a moto dad.
So as cool as it is that we can get a bike for everyone in the Surron lineup, the options that we can do for each of those bikes is nearly endless. Because the son was 10 years old, the real debate was, do we go Light Bee S and then make it larger later as he grows? Or do they go Light Bee X and we put a smaller 14, 17-inch wheel package on it? And that leads us perfectly into the aftermarket, everything that we've been doing for the last 4 years, and how much we can actually transform these bikes into something truly for everyone. Okay, so speaking of maturity in the market, there's also a very mature aftermarket for these bikes. Anything that you want to do to a Surron Light Bee, we got you covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4 years ago when we started this company, there really wasn't an aftermarket, and that's why we got into this, because when we first got our first little Light Bee all those years ago, we wanted to make it into something that it didn't come that way from the factory. And so that's been our journey for the last 4 years, is developing this aftermarket, working with partners like Warp 9 and all the other companies out there to develop these parts and make these bikes just the most unbelievable fun play bike that you can imagine.
Yeah, so when we started, I remember us looking online everywhere of like, well, what else can we do to these bikes just to make them that little bit, better? And there wasn't much to find. Like, nothing felt trustworthy. Like, you didn't know if you were buying from someone that was just gonna take your money and run. But most importantly, there was no community knowledge. There was no like crowdsourcing any of this. So we had to really figure it out on our own as we went along. And we were a big partner in the early days with EBMX, as even they were starting to develop all of this aftermarket, and look at what they've come today.
Yeah, the aftermarket now is incredible. I always talk about it being equivalent to a Jeep. Like, people don't really buy a Jeep because it's a Jeep. They buy a Jeep because of the aftermarket and what you can do after you buy the Jeep. And the same thing with the Surron. You look at this bike here, the only thing that came from the factory on this bike is the frame and a couple plastic bits. That's it. The rest is all aftermarket. It's absolutely incredible.
Literally the main frame, not even the swing arm, is the same. So it's kind of cool as a brand being able to sell just 3 different kinds of battery, or 3 different brands of batteries, right? Different size wheels with nearly endless tire selection, depending on what someone wants to add. Multiple suspension brands, just powertrain options that allow you to control the smoothness of the throttle down to like a running speed, all the way up to nearly 100 miles per hour if we want. And that's one thing that you can't really say about the other brands, as they're trying to catch up in the aftermarket, and vendors are trying to decide if it's worth their R&D effort to go into these other brands, because the market share is so much smaller, that we know that we can take a Light Bee and turn it into this, 55 horsepower, 100 mile per hour monster, if we want to.
This is obviously Brett's race bike, and it is capable of 30 kilowatts, which you can't do that with any of the other small bikes. So, I mean, we're talking almost up there with Stark Varg levels of power on such a small, lightweight package.
Especially when you consider the power to weight ratio. Yeah. It's just incredible. So we don't have time to go through all the bikes that we've built over the years in this one video, but depending on what you're looking for out of a bike, some examples: we built complete street-going commuter-style bikes with slick tires, and really focused on range. We have one customer that rides, I think it's like 40 miles one way to get to work. So all we had to do is add the right aftermarket battery. He plugs it in basically when he gets there and rides home. I always love telling that story. We've built bikes for hunters. We've built a ton of bikes for trail riders that just want to go out. Maybe they didn't want a gas bike, but they wanted to go out exploring. And then obviously we built a ton of race bikes.
Yeah, including our own. So this is Brett's modified Light Bee race bike. If some random person were to get on this bike, it would scare the pants off of them. It's so fast. Like,
scared me to death a few
I
times.
personally don't even know how Brett controls this bike. I can't ride it the way that it's set up. But then you look at the versatility. We've been to Red Bull TKO, extreme hard enduro, one of the hardest races in the world. Yeah. And we've done it 2 years in a row on Surron's, first Light Bee. Last year we did Ultra Bees. This year, I think we're gonna do a mixture of both. More to come on that one.
Yeah, same thing for racing the FIM Explorer Cup. Like last year when Brett went to Switzerland, I got there and was a little bit surprised to realize they were racing Light Bees in this world-class event on the side of this like insane mountain resort high up in the Alps. And he was basically racing a replica of this bike against full-blown dirt bike, what would you call those, conversions. Yeah. So it's super cool to see that. Now this year, they've matured a little bit and are now racing Ultra Bees that are competing against Stark Vargs and that Honda prototype. And they're doing so well that they're constantly on the podium every race.
Yep, and our winter series indoor arena cross, when we show up on the electric bikes, there's not very many gas bikes that can go faster than us on those small arena cross tracks. So the amount of racing that we've done on these bikes, and I don't think yet we've shown up to a race and not raced a Surron. And that's just a testament to the faith and the quality and the trust that we have in these brands to show up and win races.
Yeah, absolutely. So like when we showed up to Josh Hill's Big Hill Jam last year, I think that whole field had to have been 90% Surrons. And there were a lot of people there. Oh my gosh, there had to have been 100+ guys that showed up to race this, the small electric class. So that alone was cool to see. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, speaking of Brett and this bike in general, one memory that's just seared into my brain is the very first time we went and rode my Stark Varg when I got it last fall, right? We had a couple modified Ultra Bees that I've been racing through the GP series. We had my brand new Varg, and then you and I were out there putting in laps, and at one point I looked back and who was chasing us at the same lap time on this little Light Bee?
Not just chasing us, but he actually passed both of us. Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed, to be honest, on that, but it just shows you that a competent rider on a bike like this can actually go faster than somebody on a Stark Varg.
So let's bring this back to reality then. The crazy thing is that was a full-blown motocross track. It has that ginormous tabletop. And here's Brett railing this bike. This is literally the bike. It's still holding up. You've had Goldmember tuned up to 20 whatever kilowatts, and that was the very first Light Bee you got before we started this whole thing.
Yeah, that's a 4-year-old Light Bee. And my favorite thing about that bike actually is not only can I jump on it and tune the power up and go race it, but my daughters love that bike. I just turn the power down a little bit and make it manageable, and they have an absolute ball on that bike.
So what we're doing here is just kind of rounding out our experience with Surron, right? We've been able to do a little bit of everything on these bikes, and it's been a great journey along the way. It's kind of cool to see that the quality's only gotten better over time. The aftermarket support has only grown. The warranties are being covered really quickly, which gives me a lot of faith in an authorized dealer that Surron has our back, and that it's only going to continue growing and get better as we know that new bikes are going to come out into the market.
All right, so you've heard our opinions of why we would recommend and buy a Surron in 2024, but we want to hear what you have to say. So leave us a comment below. Tell us why you would buy a Surron in 2024.
Yeah, guys, we genuinely want to hear from you. Have we hit the mark? Is there something you would do differently? Simply let us know in the comments. And as always, if you like what we do, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.